Congressional reporter for The Hill, Emily Brooks, is with us now. She is in Washington, D.C. What's the feeling like on the streets of D.C.? You see some of these numbers. It's very concerning. Do you feel unsafe as you go about your work, your life in the nation's capital?
Well, I will say that the fact that this has been percolating down to lawmakers experiencing this, Representative Henry Cuellar of Texas being a victim of carjacking himself, demonstrates just how big of a problem it has gotten in the district. And certainly I hear from my sources on Capitol Hill, Republican staffers in particular, are frequently saying that they're looking to move across the river into Virginia because of the problems in the district. And it is a major topic of conversation for those of us that live and work here.
It is indeed concerning. It's a busy week in Washington right now. The House, as you know, Emily, is working to avoid a government shutdown. House Speaker Mike Johnson has introduced a two-step government funding stopgap bill. Tell us about what he's proposing.
Yeah, so this is to avoid a government shutdown that would start when the clock strikes midnight on Saturday morning. And this two-step stopgap essentially would have some funding run out in January 19th, and the rest would run out on February 2nd. And the reason to split that up is the idea is to avoid the Senate and Democrats in the White House trying to push through a massive, major omnibus funding bill, which House Republicans have repeatedly said they do not want to see. And this idea is that it would encourage passage of those regular appropriations bills. However, House Republicans who are more of the hardline conservative House Freedom Caucus types are saying that they do not like this plan because this extension until January and February 2nd does not have any conservative policy concessions. It would keep spending at current levels that were passed this last December under Democratic control. And they would like to see more cuts or at least more leverage to try and get some policy concessions rather than postponing again those discussions.
Right, kicking the can down the road with this laddered approach to this resolution. What types of programs, Emily, would be most impacted if a shutdown does happen?
Many programs. I mean, if this is a total whole of government problem right now. And so some of those would run out on January 19th. But if there was another shutdown that happened on February 2nd, we're talking about members of the military would not receive paychecks, things like that. So this is no single aspect of the government has been funded. But we have seen in previous years under former President Trump was that there were some aspects of the government that were funded, and you didn't see things like service members not getting their paychecks. But right now, there are no aspects of the government that are fully funded. And so that is really increasing the pressure on Congress to get this done. But of course, that internal disagreement among House Republicans is really what's been hard for them to reconcile in order to come up with a plan and negotiate with the Senate to see that we have a lot of steps further to go before we see a resolution of this throughout the end of the next fiscal year, which ends next September.
And holiday travel, one of the additional things that could see an impact as a result of this. What about the Senate? You mentioned that briefly, Emily. What plan do they have on deck?
Yeah, so the Senate is also, in the past, they have worked on plans that had just a clean, regular funding extension without conditions. The Senate would also like to see things attached to that, such as aid to Israel and aid to Ukraine. Republicans in the House have rejected that. They say that those need to pass separately. The last time we saw this scenario was on September 30th, when former Speaker Kevin McCarthy was unable to pass a Republican-only plan and ended up having this clean extension that extends until this Friday. And that really enraged a lot of his Republican colleagues, who then moved to force him out of that position. And we had that whole 3 weeks without a speaker there. And during that time, they lost a lot of time to figure out how to deal with their funding measures. And so that's another reason why, even though that prompted that big speakers battle in October, some Republicans are now saying, okay, let's still do a clean funding extension until January and February in order to get that done because they were unable to work on their funding bills during that time.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.